Well, Michelle, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
So great to be on the show today, Joe. Wonderful to meet you as well.
So let's begin our journey into your world of coaching and yoga. And there's so much that's going on here. And I want to know, first and foremost, 5 years ago, this pandemic shook all of our foundations, changed our worlds. How did you make it through the pandemic of 2020? And how has it influenced your life in 2025?
Oh, wow. Yeah. We're starting off deep, right?
Hit the ground running.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I think just prior to the pandemic, I was reflecting on this. I had done a conference session on disconnection for an ADHD conference. It was already something that I was writing about and thinking about. And then going into the pandemic, I mean, I unfortunately had a pretty significant personal loss. That same year, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in February of 2020 and passed in May of 2020.
Wow.
So not only did we have the crazy changes that were happening within the world, but also in our own family, quite a tremendous, personal change and loss. So we were impacted. I say we, my daughter and I think the isolation, obviously, that many people experience, the disconnection that I mentioned, that most folks were feeling, for us was compounded because we were also simultaneously grieving during that time.
So let's get to the heart and soul with so many titles and so many things going on. I want to know exactly what you do on a daily basis. And to do that, I'm going to put you in front of 12-year-olds. It's career day. And one of the kids is like, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer?
Yeah. In the short answer, what I like to say about coaching is I help people live better lives. You know,
Yeah.
I help them reach their goals. I help them to go from places of struggle to places of flourishing. I don't know that a 12-year-old would necessarily know what flourish means, but really to just on a day-to-day basis improve.
So what did you want to be at 12 years old? What was your dream life, dream job?
I wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Okay.
And I still love that. I mean, where we live, there are so many historic sites. I am probably 20 minutes from a site called Chimney Rock, which is a national monument of the ancient Puebloans. And so I volunteer there because it's the way that I get that need met. I was so obsessed. I even studied anthropology in college as one of my undergraduate degrees.
That's awesome. So let me ask you this. What were these foundational elements from your childhood that have allowed you to find your place in coaching, to help people find their place? What were those seeds planted that were harvested into who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'll share in the same way that I hear from a lot of folks that have been on the healing path and spiritual awakening or journey, however you want to describe it. Um, my parents were amazing, and simultaneously there was a lot of trauma and addiction in our lives. And so that experience of walking that path in early childhood and into early adulthood is really what propelled me to want to study social work and go into my master's program and become an advocate and work with children and families, which I did for a few years in New Orleans prior to Hurricane Katrina. And that's really what preceded my coaching journey.
So talk to me a little bit about inspirations or heroes. Who has been that consistent heroic force for you to carry through? Obviously you've gone through, grief, but elation and all of these different levels of being human. Who's helped you through those?
I would say early in my career, I had a mentor. He's still a good friend, David Gork, who founded the ADHD Coaching Academy, is well known in the world of neurodiversity, and worked closely with him because he wrote this book and his whole philosophy. He wrote a book called Permission to Proceed. It's basically how you can thrive despite any labels, despite any diagnoses. And much of their curriculum in that program pulls from the work of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, folks like that. And I had the pleasure when I was working as a director at a university in New Orleans to meet some of these people. And so I mentioned Martin Seligman, founder, considered the father of positive psychology. Again, going back to let's look at strengths, let's look at uh, not deficits, not the flaws, but really how do we move, to your point, from a place of struggle to flourishing.
So, if you could meet one person alive on the planet right now that's overcome, that succeeded, that would be inspirational for you on your journey, who would you love to meet and talk to?
Well, I would love to meet Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah.
with
Oh,
him.
yeah.
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 No, I really just so much of what he is talking about in terms of how we need to look at environment and lifestyle and how, and particularly when I think about neurodiversity, it's been somewhat controversial, but I do think, and I've seen this, a lot of children, and even probably, I'm a Generation X.
Yeah.
So, I think even in my area, who may have been diagnosed with ADHD, had significant trauma, or had early childhood trauma, which we know changes the brain. And there might be, and research is showing this now, that there's a lot of misdiagnosis or people conflate the two. So I would love to talk with him more about that. It's
Yeah.
sort of an area of expertise in the way that I work with clients, and I look at the intersection of both.
Yeah. My son's on the spectrum, and he has one extra long arm on his 15th chromosome. That's it. And it's been really hard to put any kind of label in that neurodivergent world. But when I thought about it, especially when he was younger, and even now with the numbers that are going up, to me, it's not a mystery because everything's changed so much. We have the way we process food, all of the cell phones we all have, all of the different levels of like technology that are going through the air. There's a vast difference between now and then, but there's also that part too where there wasn't the diagnosis. They would just be like, yeah, just do a special class, they'll get over it, it'll be fine.
Right,
You
right.
know, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. It is interesting. And I think too, when we typically talk about trauma and people will say big T or little t, it doesn't necessarily mean um, that someone had to have experienced something so significant as childhood abuse or something of that nature, right? Biologically or neurobiologically, that can be defined of, in utero, the mother had a sickness, and that changed how, biologically or genetically, the outcome of that pregnancy. There are a lot of factors that are at play that when we think about environment and lifestyle, even early development of when between 0 and 3, when children are, hitting those early milestones that may be getting in the way of, and I am very careful about how I say that, because I know within the neurodiversity camp, I have clients who think if we're working on some of these skills, if we're working on improvements, does that change my personality? Is that going to make me different? Is that saying that, like, I'm not good enough as I am? And that's not at all what it means. It's sort of like the way I see coaching, we want to optimize strengths. We want to get to a place where day to day you can really live from a place of true, authentic intention, use your strengths in the way that work best for you. There is some navigating of, like, how much do you adapt to the environment versus expecting the environment to adapt to you. But I think minimizing those challenges and deficits, it's possible. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been through it myself. I've seen thousands of clients at this point, because I've done this work for now 25 years, to be able to do so.
Yeah. When did you know that coaching was, sometimes it takes us all a while to figure out what our true calling is. When did you know coaching was it? Was there a twinkle in someone's eye? Was there a first client? Was there a moment for you?
There was a moment for me, and it started back when I was living in New Orleans. This was pre-Katrina. I was doing a lot of work within schools in areas where there was a high percentage of kids being diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, ADHD, things of that nature. Like I'm talking about kids in early elementary being placed on pretty heavy duty medication. And what struck me in those interventions or sort of interdisciplinary meetings, meaning, there were doctors and school personnel and whatnot, clinicians. No one was talking about the environment. Or let's say these kids in particular at this one school, day to day, they were experiencing gun violence, food scarcity, there was intergenerational trauma. They were in states of fight or flight. They were in survival mode. And it was a lot, most of the conversations back then, and this is going back to like early 2000s, were managing. Let's just build a treatment plan, keep them calm in the classroom. Let's manage. And that's all it was about. And not to say that that's what social work is, but that was my experience at that time in that setting. Fast forward, we relocated to San Francisco post Katrina. And at the time, I was introduced to some folks who are working in tech, and being the hub of everything that was sort of progressive in the world of personal development. Coaching was coming online. There were some studies at the University of San Francisco, or UCSF, I believe, using neuroscience, using imaging about how the brain could change, neuroplasticity. All of this was so fascinating to me. So I think it was about 2008, no, 2007, actually. I was hired by a company that did coaching for college students. And that really just opened up the door for me to be able to say, okay, we know that this is where you've been. This is where you are, but where do you want to go? Like, what's possible? Let's talk about what's next. And it really just shifting the paradigm from being in a place of stuckness, so to speak, or struggle to what is infinitely possible in your life. It was so transformative. And that's what really, it was that change in trajectory that opened it up for me. And seeing how it changed for clients led me to continue to work in that way, to the point where I pursued all, the credentials for International Coach Federation. And I did let go. I decided it was an intentional choice to not keep my licensure and move in the direction of coaching.
So, what is it that gets you up every day to do the work that you do? Because you have to get involved with people's lives, which can be very complex. How do you protect yourself and your soul, yet do the best job that you can do every day?
Yeah, I had to learn energy management and boundaries. Probably, I would say in my 30s, I hit a place of burnout myself, and coming out of that and learning those lessons shifted for me. So now I have, not only did I sort of curate an environment that supports my nervous system. For example, I live in a very small town in the mountains of Colorado where I have access to nature. So I get outside all the time. That's a really important aspect for me. I, have a lot of movement in my life, whatever that looks like, going to the gym, running, all of those things. I really nourish what I call my foundational needs. And so what I'm talking about too is all of the things I work on with clients: physical well-being, good nutrition, hydration, sleep, movement, mental and emotional flourishing, uh, spiritual practices, those are really essential to me, and community and connection. So kind of linking back to what we opened with, I've learned through a lot of, challenging times in my life how important connection is. And that doesn't necessarily mean our immediate family, it can be, but really cultivating a community of support.
So, If you had a dream tonight, ran into a much younger version of you, say 18 years old, ready to charge out into the world, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've gained, what advice would you give that young version of you?
Hmm. Don't dim your light. I was a very anxious young person, and I kind of would play small in a lot of ways. And it's taken me a while, I'm almost 50. So over many, many years to just really be okay and comfortable in my own skin. And beyond that, be able to speak confidently because I no longer see this journey for myself professionally as work. I see this as I am of service and I'm being called by God, universe, source, however you want to define it, as a channel to be able to do this work and help people improve their lives. So it's sort of like getting out of the way, you know?
So, if you were to walk into a room of everybody that knows you in a professional sense, clients, colleagues, everyone that's known you, and you could go to the front of that room and tell them a fun story about your life, first concert you went to, jumping out of an airplane, a magical place you traveled to, just a really fun story, what would you tell that room of people?
Oh man, this is a good one.
Yeah,
Fun story. Okay, I have a fun story. This happened
good.
a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
I really like kayaking, and my husband and I bought these inflatable kayaks. And early in the summer, we're testing them on the rivers here. By no means am I experienced in this area. We became more comfortable doing some float trips, doing some class twos. There's a town close to us that has a whitewater park. So we decided to go on the river. We start the trip floating, and it's so calm and easy that at one point we thought we were going the wrong way. Like people are on their paddleboards going, it looked like upstream. And we were navigating this river for probably an hour and a half. Well, we get to this point where all of a sudden I'm leading. I see these big boulders, and here come the rapids. And just like that, we're like in it. And like I said, I have some basic skills. I'm doing the best I can. We get to the Whitewater Park, and there's several tourists from Texas filming, and they're cheering us on, like, you can do it, you can do it. Um, and I'm like, okay, here we go. I say in my professional life, like, can you ride the waves? Can you ride the waves of life? And so I'm like, this is the moment. I'm gonna do it. And so we get through this Whitewater Park, and I get spun around a few times. I like figure it out. I'm determined to not go backwards. So it's like 5 different levels. We get to the bottom. I'm so like incredibly happy and surprised that I did it, but I'm like shaking. It's like the adrenaline is starting to wear off. And I look at my husband, who was an army ranger in Afghanistan. And I'm like, wow, that was so intense. And he was like, I didn't feel a thing.
Oh, wow.
Later, people come running over like, oh, here's the video, here's the video. And I'm telling friends about it, and they're like, you did that? That's like class 4. That was insane. I'm like, yeah, now I have a good story to tell.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So let me ask you this. Of everything that you've gone through in your life, everything that you've evolved to, achieved through, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, my daughter,
Yeah.
she's about to be 17, and she's just the most amazing human. Like, I don't want to not take full credit, for parenting, but just watching the person that who she's become, the creative, she's a musician, she's an artist, she's an amazing soul. And yeah, I think that will forever be my most prized achievement, or special accomplishment, however you want to define it.
So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that you work with or that knows you, but you run the show. What is your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Mm. Well, I like to have fun. I'm humorous. I'm so equal parts because very driven, very ambitious. I'm a Capricorn sun. I don't know how much you know about astrology, but typically like very hardworking, type A practical, but also have this emotional Cancer moon. And I'm very intuitive. Like I said, I like to have fun. I love adventure. I love all things, natural beauty. Going back to the Indiana Jones reference, yeah, I love to just have a good time as well. Like, yeah, professionally, I would take things very seriously. I like achieving goals. I like to continuously learn and grow. And I like to kind of live life, that expression of suck the marrow out of life. Like that is something that I really live by. I've had as you mentioned, and I mentioned in the beginning, I experienced a lot of loss. I do think it's so important to enjoy this life, to live this life to the fullest.
So let me ask you this. If anybody out there has listened to this and they're kind of on the edge of needing some coaching, they're curious, what would you say to them to urge them to come to you with questions and to start that exploratory journey?
Well, I think if they're already questioning where they are and starting to do some research, right? There's so much information out there. I would invite them to check out my website. It's souljourncoach.com. Book a discovery call. Let's have a chat because there are a lot of options to get started. I didn't talk about this, but really my work now centers on nervous system regulation and a lot of somatic embodiment work, which is so essential and so needed now for us to navigate these times and to be able to feel solid and grounded. And like I said, ride the waves, right? A lot of my clients come to me and they're struggling to stay afloat. They really are in survival mode. Maybe you can get to a point where you can learn to ride the waves and even, navigate that whitewater part.
Well, and I think it's a good point you made there with our modern times that we're living through. It's increasingly gotten more anxious and scary, and there's so many new elements that have been thrown in, and it really is good to be able to regulate our nervous system and what we're
Yeah,
doing and who we are. I think it's more essential now than ever.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to make that first step, reach out, hire you, any of the good business, where do they go?
Souljourncoach.com is my website. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Substack, I'm on LinkedIn. Um, Michele Oelking it's pretty easy to find. So yeah, I'd love to connect.
Okay, I will put links in the show notes to all of this. It's so great to meet you. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time today and continued success.
Thank you so much, Joe. Wonderful to meet you as well. And hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.